of a center or practice finds out about Valerie Carlton, this is from experience, they look at it not as I have, phoenixed out of the ashes and therefore truly have something that might benefit others to share. They look at it more as though I'm damaged goods.
Mm-hmm. And I think this kind of leads quite nicely into what we ended our conversation on the telephone about, how do you kind of negotiate these two personas? How do you kind of take from them both maybe to make a more integrated whole instead of having two very separate?
Absolutely. You were awesome sharing that. I mean, I've really been doing a lot of thinking about that, and I think that it's been helpful and really empowering. Because I think that when I first came to you, I was strong, but there was still some fear.
Mm-hmm.
And as I tried to understand the fear, I think I started weakening and deteriorating with Michael's kind of bullying at the time that I was weakening.
Yeah.
And, looking back, he would absolutely just refuse to bring the name Valerie Carlton even into conversation. Openly voiced that, he kind of buried her, thank God she's dead and gone, and would only use Sarah, and felt proud or, willing to introduce me as that, as Sarah Bas-Hinda. So, when you brought that up, it had been months that it kind of like reawakened, wait a minute, Valerie Carlton's not dead.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a resource.
Yeah.
So much so that I actually, today, used, I guess, my celebritism to advocate for a inmate in Maryland who is being grossly medically neglected, and it's just absolutely horrifically inhumane. And
so when you do things like that, how do you introduce yourself?
Valerie Carlton. Now most people, I'll speak because I also have a lot of legal knowledge and experiences now too.
Sure.
So I'm better equipped to speak to politicians and attorneys. So I will communicate with authority with the type of verbiage and eloquence that causes them to take me serious regardless of who I am. So then they're like, who are you?
Right.
And then I say Valerie Carlton. And then they'll say, who are you with? And I'll say, that's not the point. My committee will be aware or have been made aware. I am an advocate, and there are other advocates involved, which is true.
Right.
And you can Google my name.
How is it for you, though, to introduce yourself as Valerie Carlton?
I don't quite know where to go with my answer. I mean, there's a lot of different... I'm not understanding, are you asking me the initial feeling, or are you asking me what caused me to finally use my name in that way? I'm not understanding.
I mean, that's an interesting question, although what I was asking for was more, what is the feeling? What is that like to introduce yourself as Valerie Carlton when so much of your life right now is Sarah Bas-Hinda?
Well, it's weird because although my reality and life as Valerie Carlton seems surreal. The Sarah Bas-Hinda is actually more kind of fantastic and not as grounded and therefore weaker than the reality of Valerie Carlton.
Because Valerie Carlton is the one who struggled and who survived.
Valerie Carlton is Valerie Carlton Valerie Carlton was almost a martyr in the 21st century and hopefully won't be ever potentially put in that position again.
Right.
Valerie Carlton has made history. Valerie Carlton is a legal landmark. Valerie Carlton is a name that will probably be written about and chronicled, like Elizabeth Packard in the 19th century, who I'm often compared to. So that's a little bit of a heavy trip to really dive into. I don't want to dive into. I need to keep my head, you know, in the right place.
Well, I guess that's kind of what I was wondering is, has Valerie Carlton become so much that in some ways it's overwhelming to be her all the time?
It's not overwhelming to be her all the time. It is exhausting to be her all the time. And it is, I'm not going to say that she holds a curse, but I am a very religious, spiritual woman, and there have been many markubals and what we call tzaddiks, which are really holy, witch doctor-like type, you know, guru platformed people in my religion that have spent a lot of time and care choosing and praying and blessing the name Sarah Bas-Hinda.
Right.
So it is it's a name and an identity that I feel more protected and shielded with when I start using Valerie Carlton. And this is very literal, not just figurative. But the more I am Valerie Carlton, the more I'm kind of putting myself on a potential front line. And when I venture near or on that front line as Sarah Bas-Hinda, I am shielded.
Right.
Only because of the name, if not also because of all the blessings and the spiritual mumbo-jumbo.
Sure.
You know, I've worked it that way, where I've gone on the front line as Sarah Bas-Hinda, and people, you know, I'm an advocate, or I'm a paralegal, or I'm a spokeswoman for Valerie's cause, is very, very different than I am Valerie Carlton, and I'm confronting you with so much behind me or attached.
And it's important to have some protection, to have some security.
Yeah, I'll tell you, on that level, I have some, I don't want to call it fear, but I have some little bit of anxiety, and I believe rational concern. Because I think I told you that I was put in touch with a state police victims service specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I spoke to her, she seemed extremely understanding,
Mm-hmm.
compassionate, and really almost driven to try to get me assistance,
Mm-hmm.
including saying that she had a contact in the New York, Manhattan FBI that she was going to communicate with. She explained to me, what it was that he did. We had a conference
Right.
on how to prepare her for that meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and then she was going to get back in touch with me, and she was going to try and get this FBI contact in touch with Michael
Mm-hmm.
Ettinger.
Right.
So no one has contacted Michael or I.
Hmm.
And I put a few calls, leaving messages in with this woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I even tried to call her from Michael's Rhinebeck home landline,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that she was avoiding my phone number.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, or potentially, Michael's name would have come up
Right.
in the police caller ID as well.
Right.
She is aware of his name and she's aware of that address.
Mm-hmm.
So I have not yet tried
Mm-hmm.
to call her from a completely unknown location.
Right.
But what that says to me is it says to me that something scared her off. And whatever scared her off, I should have awareness,
Hmm.
better awareness, and concern on what might be lurking.
Mm-hmm.
I've had run-ins with the FBI before,
Right.
and this is how they play. And what that says to me is either the FBI said, stay out of it,
Mm-hmm.
or the FBI lied and scared her off. Because even if the FBI just tried to pacify her,
Mm-hmm.
there's no reason why she wouldn't take my calls.
Right.
I mean,
right.
you should have heard her. She was really going off
Mm-hmm.
on how victimized I was, and by damn it, she's gonna help because clearly New York has tried.
So, is part of your concern here that you let your guard down?
No, not at all that I let my guard down. My concern is that I've always tried to kind of be, 5 to 10 steps ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
I let my guard down, which is why I was recaptured.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I don't think I let my guard down,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't let my guard down, and I don't like that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. But somehow it feels like possibly she's betrayed you.
No. There's nothing that she could have done that would have betrayed me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason for her to make any false allegations.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't know me.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't feel as though she has betrayed me one iota. She doesn't owe me anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just find her silence alarming
Mm-hmm.
and disappointing, and a red flag that something is lurking that
Mhm.
is not out for my best.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
it's difficult for me to explain what goes through, or what went through my mind when I was recaptured, and when all of the events that evolved thereafter just gave me such enlightenment and additional intelligence on, what I had not been aware of. It's like when you're caught, they are not as needing to hide what was up.
Right.
So again, I know how they play. And it appears as though they're playing right now.
So what do you do about that? Both kind of literally, how do you handle it, but also emotionally, how do you cope with all of this that's going on?
I don't stay in it. I don't focus on it. If it comes into my head, which it usually doesn't even, I just assure myself that I'm safe. I'm not doing anything wrong. And even if by some crazy ass chance that I was ever arrested, there is public records and plenty of legal documents within this state that I think would keep me within this state, and I think that I would not lose my life, and potentially some degree of justice could be had within this state. So I don't feel the same level of threat as I did. And I also believe, as I always have, that my fate is contingent upon my faith and certain spiritual laws. So I am a working experiment to confirm and provide evidence to myself that my theories are correct. And so far, I'm here, and I made history, and nobody else has done this, and I'm advocating, and besides the relationship, challenges with Michael, I'm living a very good life that very few people are blessed this way. So I must be doing something right. I just have to make sure that I keep doing it right. And that's part of what Michael and I argue about, because he doesn't have the same knowledge and obviously not the same experiences, and therefore wisdom through experience.
Right.
So he sees religion or religious practices or spiritual laws as like I'm getting advice from an astrologer, like total bullshit.
Right.
And so if he starts to try to distract me or, sabotage, cause obstructions to my practice, I do see it as life-threatening. And he feels as that is irrational hysteria.
Because it's so hard for him to understand how important and how life-sustaining that is for you.
Right, because, you know, it's weird. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody who could say the same thing. In other words, it's not like people are going around saying, well, we have to light candles and say these prayers because if we don't, we're going to be locked up.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right.
However, I have pulled myself, and this is my belief, you could disagree, I believe that my actions and my beliefs and my relationship with God and my religious practice have been catalysts to rescue me, to remove obstacles and darkness and really shield me from some, what I believe is literal and sincere demonic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say demonic, most people don't understand where I'm coming from, because when you say demonic, you think of The Exorcist, and you think of what people know of as the word demonic.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the way that's not where I'm coming from, because my education and my knowledge base on is broader than most people from my life experiences and education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I believe in God, and I believe in angels, and I believe that there are many, many, many different kinds of angels that most people are not aware of. And I believe that there are angels that were created to be avenging and destructive and malicious and executioner type divine beings. Therefore, any ill fate that I have had would have been handed out by God, or at the very least not stopped. Therefore, I have learned that when you get bad news, or when a person is faced with a difficult challenge or overwhelming negativity, rather than looking at the situation from a human perspective, how do I correct the situation and better my situation, I look at how do I appease God, how do I get God to change this verdict, sentence, or give me divine assistance out of this calamity. And I've done that many times, and it's gotten me out.
Well, I think that, I mean, from what you've told me of your story, it sounds like that's happened in a very kind of concrete and real way, in the way that the religious community kind of surrounded you and fought for you and protected you, and also then in an emotional and spiritual way to help you to be stronger, to not let the fear, anxiety, and those kind of negative feelings take over, which they very well could have in the midst of everything that you've been through.
Right, well, on the surface it's clear, but there are so many deeper layers and levels, and, you know, I spoke to my writer and other people. I could really write a, Mac Daddy textbook on how to do this with citations and historical evidence and facts that would, really be, strong. Bible, Quran strong. But that would take me years, and it would take a lot of resources. But the fact that I have that vision, I know that it could be done. Is something that I can only think and remain humble with, that God, for whatever reason, doesn't want that book, that resource to exist right now in today's time.
So I kind of want to go back to a little bit how we started this conversation. So who is this now? Who is this person that's speaking now? Is this Sarah, or is this Valerie, or is this some sort of combination of the two?
Yeah, it's like what you're asking me is that I need to come up with like almost a third, identity, like in a marriage. And it's not that I have a split personality and I'm only Valerie or I'm only Sarah.
I understand that.
It's just that Valerie Carlton has a status in this world that my alias, not identity, but alias, doesn't have. And I use my alias, as most people, I guess, who have an alias would do, in a protective, hopefully intelligent way. So when I'm here, I am who I am, and I am both. I tell people, I said, my driver's license says Valerie, and the Jewish world and the rabbis know me as Sarah Bas-Hinda, by virtue of the fact that my mother's Hebrew name is Hinda, by virtue of the fact that as a Jew and an Orthodox observant Jew, we are given a Hebrew Torah name. So
then what is it like for you when Michael says, I believe that Valerie's dead. Valerie's dead to me.
No, I want that name to be like dead. It just